Awesome, awesome. So Nick Charlton left to become the running game specialist for the Cleveland Browns. That means UConn needed a new offensive coordinator. They didn't have to look too far as they brought in Gordon Samus to be the new OC, who was previously the offensive line coach, and now will be doing both. Can you tell us if there'll be any changes in this offense here in 2024?
I think there will be. One of the big changes is personnel, which I'm sure we'll get into. But obviously the knock on offensive line coaches is everyone thinks it's going to be we're just going to run. And he said several times, like, that's not what we're going to do. We're still going to run the ball a lot. That's UConn's identity and has been really since they've moved up to FBS. But they're really looking for more verticality in the passing game. For UConn fans, the past couple of years with Nick Charlton, there's been a lot of screens and a lot of running the ball. And really screens are essentially runs. So we're looking at running the ball about 70% of the time. So a little more electricity in the passing game. But they still, they have four really good running backs that they love and they want to get out in the field in some capacity. So, I think you're going to see a little more creativity in getting those guys involved, getting the ball into space.
Well, let's move over to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. The starter from last year, Taquan Roberson, transferred out after the spring to Kansas State, and other backup, Zion Turner, transferred to Jacksonville State. Nick Ever portals in via Wisconsin, and then the year before that was at Oklahoma. Can you tell the listeners what they need to know about this quarterback room?
Yeah, from all accounts, Evers is going to be the guy. He passed up some opportunities to be backups at schools like Ole Miss or Iowa. So he's coming in and he wants to play. And I think that's the expectation, barring some catastrophe. We know Evers coming out of high school, top 15 quarterback prospect coming to Oklahoma, then going to Wisconsin. He kind of got recruited over a little bit at those places, but by some reports, like especially in the Athletic, there was also some concern about him really grasping the playbook and translating what's in the playbook onto the playing field, right? So I think with UConn, I think you're looking for him to become a leader in that room, but also get the mental part of his game right. He, from what I've heard so far, and he didn't come in for the spring. He came in after the spring practice was over. He's big. He's 6'3", he's 205, but he runs, I think 40 in the 4.5s. Like he's really athletic. He can make throws that, from what I have heard from some of the workouts, some throws I haven't been seen at UConn in
Dan Orlovsky.
We really haven't had a lot of success at the quarterback position. So, he's really one of the most talented quarterbacks they've had. At this point, it's can he do all the other things that are not football?
And people that maybe don't know a lot about Nick Evers is he got, I don't know, you could say recruited over there at Wisconsin, but then they were trying to move him in at wide receiver a little bit because he's just an athletic dude, and you want to get your best athletes out there on the field, so he can do a lot. So just another note there on Nick Evers.
For sure, and I think they love that he can run, and that really makes the defense kind of focused in on him a little bit. If the play breaks down, is he going to run? Can he go make a throw on the run? It's something that UConn hasn't had recently. A lot of it has been defenses being like, I'm going to make them throw. Go ahead and make this throw on us. And, so far for the defenses, it's worked out for the most part. So they really like Evers. When it comes to Joe Fagnano, he's a really experienced guy. He came in. He was the quarterback for Nick Charlton back when he was the head coach at Maine. So he came in last year, and the thought was, okay, well, he knows Charlton. He knows his playbook in and out. He won the job coming out of fall ball, And it surprised a lot of people, including myself, because I think a lot of the people who were watching in the media thought it'd be Roberson the whole way. So Fagnano came out, struggled against NC State. That's a tough first game coming from FCS to FBS. You're playing against NC State. Second game against Georgia State, he hurts his shoulder. He's out for the year. Roberson takes over. But prior to that, he was a starter for Maine for a couple years. So, I know that Jim Moore really values snaps. He likes snap counts, and Evers has very few. But like you said, he's such an athlete. You got to get him out there. I'm really interested to see what he can do during his spring ball. It's still a competition,
All right, let's move over to that running game. You mentioned earlier they got 4 really good running backs, and they certainly do. They do return their 2 leading rushers from last year, Cam Edwards and Victor Rosa. They did lose a few guys to the portal, but they also brought in Mel Brown from Gardner-Webb and Darrell Robinson from Charlotte. How did the running back room look in the spring?
They looked really good. They love Cam Edwards. This was a guy, he wasn't even I think he was running back 4 coming into last season, right? He was recruited pretty lightly, local kid out of Connecticut. He was a defensive back. They decided to move him to running back. And their top 2 running backs from last season left before games 3 and 4. Before game 3 and then after game 4. And then Victor Rosa struggled with some injuries mid-year, so it was Cam Edwards, and he ended up leading the team in rushing, I think close to 5 yards per carry. He's just a really good bruising back, but he also has a little bit of speed. He really hits the hole with intensity, and he'll be back. Rosa's back. Darrell Robinson, he was an Under Armour All-American. He looks the part, and he's fast and he's strong, and you just watch him in the spring, and it looks like he's been playing for forever. He looks like a pro. And then Mel Brown is just freaky fast. In the spring, shouldn't say spring game, was more of a spring showcase, more like a practice, but he was just blowing by the defense, just going, reaching some top speeds of over 20 miles per hour, they said. So they have all these guys. Only one, is one going to be the workhorse? If I had to hazard a guess, it's probably still going to be Edwards. But I could really see Robinson backing him up. And then, Rosa and Brown, you have to find some ways to get them the ball somehow. Their offense hasn't used a lot of running backs in the passing game. I think that's going to change with Gordon Samus as the OC. I really see, there's no other way. You have to get Mel Brown the ball. So as for who gets that first carry against Maryland, your guess is as good as mine. I'd probably have to say Edwards. He's probably going to be the first one. But I think a lot rides on this, when practice starts, the end of July, beginning of August here, who's going to really take over. Rosa was the guy coming out of 2022. He ends up being running back 3 coming into last season. So there's certainly nothing given in Storrs, regardless of their record. Everything's the open competition.
Do you think it's kind of more of a committee approach, and is it it sounds like a 4-way committee, but if you had to guess, are you thinking it's I don't know, 35-35, what's that, 15-15, or how, what do you kind of see as the split, I guess?
I could see Edwards getting at least 50% of the carries.
Okay.
And then kind of split up amongst the rest. I think Robinson probably gets a little more carries than Rosa. But, it's been a room that's struggled with injuries as well throughout the year. So I think they're kind of expecting, last year, if Edwards got hurt, there was nobody else, that was it. He was the last one that they had pretty much. So I think they're really just trying to stack up and say, injuries are part of the game, and we're prepared in case that happens. But in the meantime, we got to find ways to get these guys involved. So I would think if it ends up being like someone like Mel Brown is the workhorse back, it's probably because there's a lot of injuries. And that's no disrespect to him, but
Yeah.
I just don't think that's the plan.
Does one of them stand out as like maybe the goal line back or short yardage back?
Well, it's usually Edwards, depending on where they are in the field. But as you may know, defensive lineman Jelani Stafford actually led the team in rushing touchdowns last year with 6. Now,
So
are they going to
another guy in
that?
the mix?
They may. In spring practice last year, they were having tight end Louis Hansen as kind of a goal line back too, and they have another back who's a former linebacker, John Bechtel. I could see him getting carries at the goal line too. So
Interesting.
They, and it's funny with Stafford because teams knew it was coming. When you see a big defensive lineman line up in the backfield, like they're going to give him the ball. I think they did. They might have done 1 or 2 play actions with him back there, but for the most part, it's like we're lining up, and we're going to give this big dude the ball, and you're going to stop him. And they didn't really for the most part. So I'm curious to see if that happens again. It worked out, but Edwards.
Ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, exactly. Again, and like I said, teams knew it was coming. It was no longer a gimmick. So I would say continue on with that or find another one. Go back to Hansen. They have plenty of guys that can do that. But in this running back room itself, I still like Edwards.
Awesome. If the wide receiver room got a little bit of a makeover this offseason, Brett Buckman is the guy who will be this wily vet for the room. Cameron Ross transferred to JMU, but the Huskies bring in a litter of guys via the portal. How did this room look in the spring to you?
A lot of the guys came in after. So I think, a lot of the receivers you're going to see starting week 1 were not there in the spring. Buckman for sure. He's all reliable. He tied with Justin Jolie last year in the lead for targets. He had really good chemistry with Taquan Roberson. So remains to be seen if he'll have that chemistry with Evers. But he's a guy that, you can count on to make a catch when he needs to. But it's a room that needed to be upgraded, and it's a room that's been needed to be upgraded forever. It's been really, they've had 1 or 2 really good receivers in the past, but they haven't had like a solid roster of receivers. So, you have Skylar Bell who comes in from Wisconsin. You have TJ Sheffield coming in from Purdue. You got Jisiah Gathings from Akron. But somebody I think they're really excited about is Azariah Anderson, who's coming in from Campbell. Prior to Campbell, he was at Iowa State, but he's 6'5", he's 220. He kind of helps replace Justin Jolie. And the added benefit for UConn is he's a receiver, so you can line him up and outside and use that 6'5" frame. And he's all of it. I saw him. He was working one of the camps in June, and he's every bit of 6'5". So I've got that big target to throw to. I think, I would think coming into this, again, not having seen them all practice, I think you're looking at Buckman. I think you're looking at Sheffield. I think you're looking at Anderson. But they really have a solid stable of, 6-7 receivers that can all see the field at any time. I think they're really excited about that. That has not been the case, honestly, probably, again, since Orlovsky days. It's been a really long time.
Moving over to the tight ends, can you describe for us how to expect the tight ends to be utilized in this offense under Coach Samus? We know Justin Jolie was used pretty heavily last year. Just trying to figure out what should we expect this year.
Yeah, tight end is an interesting room. They have Louis Hansen, who transferred in from Michigan. They didn't use him a ton last year. But you had Jolie. He's really more kind of like a traditional tight end, right? Same with Alexander Honig. he was a guy they had big plans for. He transferred it from TCU. Interesting prospect. He was actually a quarterback in Germany, where he was from, and then he committed to TCU, switched over to tight end. He's a really big fella, but he went down with a knee injury in game 2. So, and he actually they had him throw one trick play against NC State. It didn't work, but it seemed like they had plans for him to do a lot of things in this offense. You have him, you have those two, and then you have an incoming freshman who I think is really an intriguing prospect, and Dominic Toy. I think he has the same sort of body type and the same athleticism as Joe Lee. So it wouldn't shock me at all to see him get out in the field in some capacity, or at least use his 4 games before a red shirt and see what he's got. I think what you're going to see is, more help in block scheme with these guys. Joe Lee was really more of a receiving type tight end. That's why he led the team in receiving. But I feel like in order to have that ground and pound run game, they're really going to need Hansen and Honig to be in the mix to help block. So I think you're going to see probably fewer receptions, fewer yards at tight end this year, but they are all certainly capable. All good pass catching tight ends. They have decent athleticism, but I don't think there's a Justin Jolie in this room, unfortunately for UConn. But ideally, the receivers help step up, and you don't need a Jolie.
So I guess the answer is we think a receiver is going to lead them in receiving this year, not a tight end.
I think so.
And then you mentioned in the previous question, is that Ezra Anderson that you think might then kind of fill into kind of what was left there by Jolie?
Yeah, I mean, they have similar compositions, right? And I think Joe Lee actually came in as a receiver. They moved him over to tight end, but they like having a big target, and I think Anderson is going to be that big target.
Do you think they'll just like hyper focus on Anderson, or do they think they're going to spread the ball out a little bit?
I think they spread the ball out quite a bit.
Okay.
I think they're really excited about TJ Sheffield. Skylar Bell was there for the spring. I think he did well. I think he has a little more work to do in order to be wide receiver 1. I would certainly not crown him that right now. And they have some guys already on the roster. They have Kyleesh Hicks, a guy. Jim Mora mentioned him several times last year. It's like, this guy's next up. So they still have receivers on their roster. I think they're kind of bringing in guys who have, like I said, he values snaps. He values existing production. But I can really see someone else on this roster also step up and, really get some solid production this year.
Well, let's look at this O-line. They lost their right guard, Christian Haynes, and left guard, Noel. Give me a chance at this pronunciation here. Noel Ofori Niado. Is that right?
Got it. Hey.
All right. Hey, how about that? They lost him to graduation, and then center Yakiri Walker to Colorado. They brought it back. Left tackle Valentin Sen and right tackle Chase Lunt. How did the coaching staff address these losses here in the offseason?
Yeah, Christian Haynes is a huge loss. What a dude he was. Really could have gone pro last year after the 2022 season, came back for his 6th year. They wanted him to work a little more at center. Jim Mora thinks he is an NFL center, and he very well may be. As of right now, he's a guard. And I love Ofori Niadu. I was out there pounding the drum, like, how is this guy not getting any looks in the NFL? Like, he wasn't in any mock drafts, but he was consistently a top 10 guard by PFF. So I'm like, I don't understand. I talked to some scouts, and they're like, well, he doesn't do anything that really stands out on film. I'm like, yeah, but he's good. He's solid. What more do you want from an O lineman? He did sign an undrafted free agency contract. I can't remember where. but hopefully not the last of him. To replace these guys, they had Jack Stewart, who was a local guy but had committed to Michigan, transferred back home. He unfortunately went down with a torn Achilles in the spring showcase. So that was a really tough loss. I think they were thinking like, okay, we're good. We have Stewart ready to step up. We have a couple other guys. Maybe we'll grab someone from the portal. They were really looking at Wes Hoey from Syracuse, and then Christopher Fortin at center. Fortin's kind of been like the Swiss Army knife of the line. He's been everywhere, but never like locked down any position. I think he gets the starting reps at center this year. So because Stewart went down, they went out, they go grab Ja'Kai Green out of Charlotte, and then Maryland before that. I think he steps into a starting role. But they have some big dudes already on their roster. You have Ben Morosky and you have Brady Wayburn, some local prep guys, and they're monstrous, man. They're huge. And Gordon Samus is a really good offensive line coach. He really develops these guys well. Like Chase Lunt and Valentine Sen, were good. Same with Haynes, but they really took off, once Samus got there. So I would think you see Ja'Kai Green. You might see Wes Hoey at a guard position, but I think you really might see Morosky. And then they also brought in Jaden Bass from Syracuse out of the portal. I don't think he's necessarily in the mix to start right away. He's a redshirt freshman. But he may, God forbid, something happens to Sen or Lunt. They've been very durable. I mean, and that's the other thing about the line, too. Last year they brought back so many starts. They just somehow don't get hurt. They're really reliable, really durable. And it's worked out really well as a unit that, I think they averaged allowing maybe 1 sack per game. It's like despite UConn's struggles in the passing game, it wasn't necessarily because of lack of protection. So it's going to be interesting to see how they look week 1 against Maryland playing against, the Terrapins have a good line as well. So we'll see what happens then. But it's been in a position that's, all things considered in recent history for UConn has been pretty solid.
So we got 3 returners and then probably 2. Is it 3? No, it'd be 2 returners. If you want
to count Fortin, he started here and there at center, like 2.5. We'll call it 2.5.
But at least guys that are here, and then we got a couple guys. You said I'm trying. Wes, is it Hohen from Syracuse, and then Ja'Kai Green from Charlotte, and then Ben, was it Morosky?
Yeah.
He'll get there sometime on the line. So good. All right. So you feel pretty good about the line here going into 2024?
I feel good.
Got some running backs that want to run behind them.
I'm sorry.
So you got some running backs that really want to run behind them. You feel good about it?
Oh yeah.
Good.
That I'm now worried about running backs. I'm not too worried about line. It's always been the passing game. I mean, it's going on 20 years now. It's been the passing game.
All right. If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, and that can be a skill position player or even an offensive lineman, who would that be?
I hate to be cliche and go with a quarterback, but I think I got to go with Evers. I think he's going to come in with a real chip on his shoulder. I'm sure he's seen the things people have said, like, you're going to UConn, you were an Oklahoma guy, now you're at UConn, blah, blah. I really think he breaks out and he shows people what made him, one of those top recruits. I think even if he gives like 3/4 of that, that's going to be good enough for UConn. I'm hoping it's more, but I think he just comes in, and with this schedule, he's not playing against SEC opponents. He's playing against AAC. He's playing against, Conference USA, some MAC. Like, I think he can really showcase his skills. I think it's either got to be him or it's going to be one of the receivers, and you can take your pick. One of them numbers game. One of them has to break out, right?
If you are watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. Until next time, we are the G5 Hive.